My older sister's voice sliced through the phone with that cold, deliberate edge she saved for moments when she wanted control. You really think you can keep your name on the trust while doing nothing for the manor Mom and I have already decided it needs to be in my name, so decisions can actually get made. Sign the papers, Elena. Stop making this harder than it has to be. She didn't wait for me to answer before she added, if you fight us, we'll have to explain to everyone why you're suddenly so attached to something you've ignored for years. Your choice. Hi, my name is Elena Harper. I am 34 years old. The call ended before I could say another word. I set my phone face down on the kitchen table and stared at the thick envelope that had arrived by courier 2 hours earlier. The return address belonged to a law firm I had never heard of. Inside were pages of dense legal language wrapped around one simple demand: I was to sign an amendment removing myself as a beneficiary of the family trust that held title to our lakeside manor. My older sister Claire would become the sole trustee with full authority to sell, renovate, or transfer the property as she saw fit. My mother, Margaret, had already signed. I read the document twice, then a third time, looking for the part where anyone asked what I thought. There wasn't one. The language was careful and polite on the surface, phrases like streamlined management and consistent family stewardship, but the intent was unmistakable. They wanted me out, and they wanted it done quietly and quickly. I had grown up spending summers at that manor. My father had taught me to sail on the lake when I was 10. I had helped choose the new windows during the last renovation 2 years ago, quietly covering part of the cost because the trust paperwork had been slow. None of that appeared in the amendment. What did appear were careful footnotes listing my older sister's ongoing personal oversight and financial contributions, facts I knew were not entirely accurate. I stood up and walked the length of my apartment, trying to steady my breathing. This was not the first time my older sister had decided what was best for everyone without asking. After our father died 5 years ago, she had taken over most conversations with the family attorney. My mother had seemed relieved to let her. I had stayed in the background, signing what needed signing, assuming fairness would hold. Apparently, that assumption had expired. My phone lit up with a text from my cousin, Nathan Ellis. Heard you're giving Claire a hard time about the manor. Hope you're not going to drag this out. Family doesn't need more drama right now. I stared at the message. Nathan lived 2 towns over from the lake. He rarely reached out unless something had already circulated through the family grapevine. Claire had clearly started making calls the moment she sent the papers. I typed back a short reply asking what exactly he had heard, then set the phone down without waiting for an answer. The knot in my chest tightened, but I kept moving. I made a pot of tea I didn't really want and carried it to the small desk where I kept my personal files. Somewhere in the bottom drawer was the original trust paperwork from 5 years ago. I pulled it out and laid it next to the new amendment. The differences were small, but deliberate dates, adjusted contribution language, rewritten. My name moved to a secondary schedule that could be removed with one signature. I took a screenshot of the comparison and sent it to my best friend Sophia Rivera with a single line, "Can we talk tomorrow? It's about Claire and the manor again." Sophia answered within minutes. Usual spot 10 a.m. I'll be there. That night, I slept in short stretches. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the careful legal language that turned years of my involvement into nothing. I kept reminding myself that reacting emotionally would only give them the reaction they expected. I needed to be strategic. I needed facts. The next morning, Sophia was already at our corner table when I arrived. She had ordered my usual coffee and pushed it toward me without a word. I slid the papers across to her. She read in silence, her expression growing tighter with each page. "This is aggressive," she said finally. "They're not just asking you to step back. They're rewriting history on paper. Look at this line about primary stewardship. That's not how the trust was written." I nodded. "I know. I also got a text from Nathan last night. Claire's already talking to other people." Sophia leaned back. "She's isolating you before you can push back." "Classic move. What are you going to do?" "I have an appointment with a trust attorney next week," I said. "Sophia, if I fight this, it's going to get ugly." My mother signed it. She's never stood up to Claire on anything this big. Sophia was quiet for a moment. "You know, I was at the community center the other night for that fundraiser. I saw Claire in the hallway on the phone. She was talking about finalizing the transfer and making sure you didn't cause problems. She sounded like she was coordinating with someone, probably your mom or their lawyer. It didn't sound like a normal conversation." The words landed with a quiet weight. Sophia had no reason to lie. She had been my friend since college, long before any of this family tension had names attached to it. I folded the papers back into the envelope. I need to know exactly what they're willing to say out loud when they think no one else is listening. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed my hand once. "Then find out. And don't sign anything until you do." I left the cafe with the envelope under my arm and a new resolve that felt both steady and heavy. The legal papers were only the opening move. My older sister and my mother had already started reshaping the story around me. If I was going to protect what was mine, I would have to move carefully and document everything. That afternoon, another envelope arrived. This one was thinner. Inside was a single typed page from my mother. The tone was gentle, almost apologetic. She wrote that she was getting older and wanted to see the manor in capable hands before anything happened to her. She hoped I would understand that signing was the loving thing to do for the family. I read it twice. Then I placed it next to the amendment and took a photograph of both documents side by side. The contrast was sharp. One page was cold legal strategy. The other was soft emotional pressure. Together they formed a complete argument designed to make refusal feel like selfishness. I saved the photo in a secure folder on my phone and added a note with the date and time. Then I called the trust attorney's office and confirmed my appointment for the following Tuesday. Between now and then, I would gather every record. I had emails about renovations, receipts for materials I had purchased, old text messages where my older sister had asked me to handle things she didn't want to deal with. I would not sign. Not yet. Not until I understood exactly what they were trying to hide behind the polite language and the family pressure. The phone on my desk rang. The screen showed my older sister's name. I let it go to voicemail. Whatever she wanted to say next, I needed to hear it with a clear head and a record button already running. The voicemail played on speaker while I sat at my desk with a fresh notebook open. My older sister's voice filled the room smooth at first, then sharpening into that familiar sarcasm she used when she wanted to land every word like a precise cut. "Elena, I know you're sitting there overthinking everything like you always do. Those papers are straightforward. Sign them. Let Mom have some peace in her later years. And stop acting like the manor is some personal trophy you earned just by showing up a few times. You've been too busy climbing your corporate ladder to care about family responsibilities. If you drag this out, I'll have to start explaining to the rest of the family exactly why you're being so difficult. Don't make me do that. You have until Friday. The message ended. I saved it without deleting, then added the date and time to my notebook. The tone was the same one she had used since we were teenagers, whenever she wanted something that belonged to both of us. Only now the stakes involved lawyers and a property that held decades of our shared history. I called the number for the trust attorney Sophia had recommended. The receptionist scheduled me for Tuesday morning with Linda Shaw. That gave me 4 days to gather what I could. I opened my old email archives and started pulling every message that mentioned the manor renovations, every receipt I had kept for materials I purchased when the trust reimbursement was delayed. There were dozens. I created a new folder on my secure drive and labeled it simply Documentation. Mid-afternoon, my work phone rang. It was Daniel Brooks from the compliance team 2 floors down. We had collaborated on a few regulatory reviews, but rarely spoke outside of meetings. Elena got a minute. He asked, his voice low. I was at lunch with some people from the regional office, and one of them mentioned your family. Something about a property dispute and you being difficult. I told them it was probably nothing, but I thought you should know it's circulating. The knot in my chest tightened another notch. Claire had reached someone connected to my workplace. The gossip was no longer contained to distant cousins. Thank you for telling me, I said evenly. I appreciate it. After we hung up, I added his name and the conversation to my notebook. Then I dialed the number for Mr. Harlan, the caretaker, who had lived on the Lakeside Manor grounds for nearly 20 years. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but cautious. Miss Elena, it's been a while. Everything all right up there in the city? I explained that I needed copies of the older maintenance logs and any records of who had paid for specific repairs over the last 3 years. He was quiet for a moment. I can pull those together, he said slowly. But your sister was here yesterday with your mother. They asked me a lot of questions about the same things. Wanted to know if I remembered who authorized the new dock last summer. I told them the truth, that you handled most of the contractor calls because you were the one who noticed the old one was rotting. My hand tightened on the phone. Did they say anything else? Mr. Harlan hesitated. They mentioned you might be signing some papers soon and that it would make things simpler for everyone. I didn't ask for details. Not my place. But if you need those records, I'll have them ready whenever you want to come get them. Or I can scan and email them. I thanked him and asked him to email the scans if it was easier. Before we ended the call, he added one more thing. Miss Elena, I've been here a long time. I know what you put into that place. Just be careful how you push back. Your sister can be very persuasive when she wants something. The line went quiet after that. I saved the call notes and added Mr. Harlan's name to my growing list. He was the first person outside my immediate circle who had spoken plainly about what he had seen. That evening, Sophia texted me a voice memo. Her message was short. I was at the community center again tonight helping set up for the weekend event. Claire was there with your mom. They were in the back office. I didn't mean to listen, but the door was open a crack. Sending this in case it helps. I played the memo. The audio was faint but clear enough. My older sister's voice came through first, followed by my mother's softer replies. Claire? She'll fold. She always does when it gets uncomfortable. Once the papers are signed, we can list the manner quietly and split everything the way we discussed. Mom, you already signed the amendment. That's the important part. My mother? I just want this settled before anything happens to me. Elena means well, but she's never been practical about these things. Claire? Exactly. And if she tries to fight it, we have the statements ready. The one from the contractor about who really coordinated the work. We just need to make sure Harlan doesn't complicate things. I'll talk to him again. The memo ended. I played it a second time, then saved it in the same secure folder. The conversation confirmed what Sophia had overheard earlier. They were coordinating statements and already planning to sell the property once I was removed. The witness statement they mentioned was likely the one Mr. Harlan had been pressured to adjust. I sat back and stared at the screen. The pieces were lining up faster than I expected. My older sister and my mother were not simply asking me to step aside. They were building a paper trail that would make any objection look unreasonable or even dishonest. Tuesday morning arrived quickly. I drove to Linda Shaw's office in the financial district. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed with a calm presence that made the room feel smaller and more focused. I laid out the amendment, the voicemail, the family text, the memo Sophia had sent, and the maintenance records Mr. Harlan had already emailed overnight. She read through everything without comment. At first, then looked up. The amendment itself has several inconsistencies, she said. The dates on the contribution claims don't match the trust's original records. More importantly, the way they're attempting to remove you as beneficiary requires either your consent or a court finding of incapacity or abandonment. They don't have either yet. What they do have is a coordinated effort to create the appearance of consent through pressure and selective documentation. She tapped the voice memo transcript I had printed. This recording is useful context, but it's not admissible on its own. If you can get a sworn statement from the caretaker confirming the actual contributions and any conversations where he was asked to alter his recollection, that strengthens your position considerably. We can file a petition to preserve the status quo while we investigate the discrepancies. It would prevent them from selling or transferring anything until this is resolved. I nodded. The plan felt solid, measured exactly what I needed. I authorized her to prepare the petition. Before I left, she gave me one more piece of advice. Document every interaction from now on. If they call, let it go to voicemail or record if your state allows. If they show up, have a witness. They're counting on you backing down to avoid conflict. The moment you stop playing that role, they'll escalate. I drove back to my apartment with the petition paperwork in my bag and a clearer sense of the next steps. That afternoon, another text arrived from Nathan Ellis. Claire says you're refusing to sign and making things difficult for Mom. She's really upset. Can you just do this one thing for the family? I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded it to Linda Shaw with the rest of my documentation. Then I called Mr. Harlan again and asked if he would be willing to provide a written statement about the work I had coordinated and any pressure he had felt from my older sister or mother. He agreed without hesitation. I've watched that place for 20 years, he said. I know who actually showed up when things needed fixing. I'll write it out tonight and have it notarized tomorrow. By Wednesday, the petition was filed. Linda Shaw notified the opposing counsel that any attempt to sell or encumber the property would be met with an immediate injunction request. The same day, my mother called my cell phone 3 times. I let each one go to voicemail. The messages grew shorter and more strained. The first, "Elena, honey, please, just sign the papers. This doesn't have to be ugly." The second, "Your sister is handling everything. You're making your mother worry." The third, "If you keep this up, you're going to regret it. Family comes first." I saved each message and added them to the file. The pressure was increasing exactly as Linda had predicted. Thursday morning, I received an envelope at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a single typed page that looked like a partial witness statement. It was dated 2 days earlier and signed by someone claiming to be a contractor who had worked on the dock. The statement said my older sister had been the primary point of contact and that I had rarely been involved. The language was careful, but the intent was clear. They were already manufacturing the paper trail they needed for court. I called Linda Shaw immediately. She told me to bring it in and that we would add it to the evidence of potential fraud. While I was on the phone with her, another call came through. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short and anonymous. A woman's voice I didn't recognize said only, "Check your email." The full recording from last night might interest you. The sender wants to stay out of it for now. I hung up with Linda and opened my secure email. There was a new message with an audio file attached and no sender name visible. I downloaded it but didn't play it yet. The timing felt too convenient. Someone inside their circle was feeding me information, but I had no idea who or why. I saved the file without opening it and added the anonymous message to my notebook. Then I drove to the notary to pick up Mr. Harlan's sworn statement. He met me at the door of the small office near the lake and handed me the sealed envelope himself. "I wrote down everything I remember," he said quietly, "including the conversation yesterday, when your sister asked me to refresh my memory about who paid for the dock. I told her I couldn't do that because it wouldn't be true. She didn't like that answer. He looked tired but steady. I thanked him and promised to keep him updated through my attorney." As I turned to leave, he added one more thing. "Miss Elena, whatever happens with the papers, the place itself remembers who took care of it. That counts for something, even if the lawyers argue about it." I drove back toward the city with the notarized statement on the seat beside me and the unplayed audio file waiting on my phone. The pressure from my older sister and my mother had shifted from polite requests to coordinated documentation and anonymous tips. Someone was helping me see the full picture, but I still didn't know who or what their endgame was. Friday morning, the deadline my older sister had given me arrived with another voicemail. This one was from my mother. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Elena, I signed those papers because Claire said it was the only way to keep everything in the family. If you don't sign too, she says we might lose the manor to legal fees. Please don't let that happen. I'm asking you as your mother." I listened to it twice. Then I forwarded it to Linda Shaw, along with everything else. The petition was already in motion. The injunction request was ready if they tried to move forward with any sale. I had the maintenance records, the caretaker's sworn statement, the voice memo from Sophia, and now a potential second recording from an unknown ally. I still hadn't played the anonymous audio file. I saved it for the meeting with Linda on Monday. Whatever was on it, I wanted my attorney to hear it first. The weekend passed in a strange quiet. No more calls from my mother or sister. No new texts from Nathan. The silence felt heavier than the pressure had. They were waiting to see if I would fold before the legal process advanced. Monday morning, I walked into Linda Shaw's office with the latest documents and the unopened audio file. She listened to the family voicemails first, then asked me to play the anonymous one. The recording began with background noise papers shuffling, then my older sister's voice, clearer than in Sophia's memo. We need the statement to say she was barely involved. Harlan's being difficult, but we can work around him. Once Elena signs or the court removes her, we list the property and split the proceeds 3 ways like we planned. Mom gets her share. I handle the sale, and Elena gets a small settlement to go away. She won't fight if she thinks it's already decided. My mother's voice answered softer but present. Just make sure it looks fair on paper. I don't want anyone saying we pushed her out completely. The recording ended. Linda Shaw stopped the playback and looked at me. This changes the timeline, she said. They're not just pressuring you. They're already dividing assets they don't fully control yet. We filed the injunction request today and request an emergency hearing. The anonymous sender just gave us leverage we didn't have yesterday. I nodded, but my mind was still on the voices. My mother had sounded resigned rather than convinced. My older sister had sounded certain she would win. The third voice, the one that had sent the recording, was still unknown. Someone close enough to record them without being noticed had chosen to send it to me instead. Linda Shaw began typing the emergency filing. I sat across from her and added the new details to my notebook. The legal battle was no longer theoretical. It was active. And somewhere in the middle of it, an ally I hadn't identified yet had decided the truth mattered more than family loyalty. I left her office with copies of the new filings and drove toward my apartment. The phone rang once on the way. It was my older sister again. I let it go to voicemail and kept driving. Whatever she wanted to say now, it could wait until the court had the full picture. The anonymous recording sat on my phone like a live wire. I still didn't know who had sent it. But I knew one thing with certainty. The people who had tried to remove me quietly were no longer the only ones keeping records. The anonymous recording sat on my phone like a live wire. I still didn't know who had sent it. But I knew one thing with certainty. The people who had tried to remove me quietly were no longer the only ones keeping records. Linda Shaw listened to the new audio file in silence, her expression growing more serious with each passing second. When it ended, she set the phone down and looked across her desk at me. "This is stronger than I expected," she said. The language about already planning to sell and divide the proceeds shows intent that goes beyond simple pressure. Combined with Mr. Harlan's sworn statement and the inconsistencies in the amendment, we have enough for the emergency hearing. I'm filing the injunction request this afternoon. They won't be able to list the property or move any funds tied to the trust until a judge reviews everything. I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle into something solid rather than heavy. "What happens if they push back?" "They will," Linda said calmly. "Your sister has already shown she's willing to coordinate statements and isolate you through family channels. The hearing will likely happen within a week. Be prepared for them to paint you as the difficult one. That's why we document everything. I left her office with copies of the filing and drove home through afternoon traffic that felt slower than usual. My older sister called twice on the way. I let both go to voicemail. The first message was short and sharp. Elena, this is getting ridiculous. Mom is stressed and you're making it worse. Sign the papers or we're going to have to involve the court. Don't say I didn't warn you. The second was colder. You think you're so smart with your lawyers? You have no idea what this is going to cost you in the family. Nathan already thinks you're being selfish. So does everyone else who's heard about it. I saved both without replying and added them to the growing file. The public gossip my older sister had started was working exactly as she intended, turning other relatives against me before I could explain my side. I felt the old familiar sting of being cast as the problem, but this time I didn't absorb it the way I once had. I had evidence now. I had a plan. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. In the days leading up to it, the silence from my mother and sister was replaced by a different kind of pressure. Nathan texted again, this time more pointed. Claire says you filed something in court. That's not how family handles things. You're embarrassing Mom in front of everyone. I didn't answer him either. Instead, I focused on work and on organizing the last pieces of documentation. My assistant at the bank, Mia Chen, quietly helped me pull old project files that showed the hours I had spent coordinating contractors for the manor when no one else wanted to deal with the details. She didn't ask questions, just handed me the folders with a small nod. Another name added to the quiet list of people who had chosen not to take sides against me. Thursday morning, I arrived at the courthouse with Linda Shaw. My older sister and my mother were already there with their attorney, a polished man in a dark suit who looked impatient. Claire's expression was tight and controlled. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. Neither of them spoke to me as we waited. The hearing itself was brief but intense. Linda presented the original trust documents, Mr. Harlan's notarized statement, the voice memo Sophia had recorded the inconsistencies in the amendment, and the newest audio file. When the judge asked about the anonymous recording, Linda explained that we were still tracing the sender, but that the content spoke for itself. My older sister's attorney argued that the amendment was a reasonable family decision and that I was simply refusing to cooperate out of spite. Claire sat rigid, her jaw set, while he spoke. When it was her turn to address the court, she leaned forward slightly. Elena has always been difficult about family matters, she said, her voice steady, but edged with the same sarcasm I knew too well. She shows up when it suits her career schedule and then disappears. My mother and I have carried the real responsibility for the property. This amendment simply reflects that reality. The judge looked at the evidence again, then at me. I kept my voice even when I spoke. I coordinated the major renovations 2 years ago because the trust process was slow. I covered costs when reimbursements were delayed. Mr. Harlan can confirm that. I never refused to be involved. I was simply never asked until they wanted me to sign away my interest. The judge granted the temporary injunction. The amendment could not be enforced, and no sale or transfer of the property could proceed without my consent or a full hearing on the merits. It was a clear win on paper. My older sister's face went pale for a moment before she recovered her composure. My mother looked down at her hands and didn't speak. After the hearing, Linda told me we had bought time and leverage. The discrepancies and the recorded conversations made any further attempt to remove me legally risky for them. She expected their attorney to advise settlement rather than prolonged litigation. I drove home feeling the partial victory settle in. I had protected my interest in the manor. I had stopped the quiet transfer they had tried to force through legal papers and family pressure. But the cost was already visible in the way my mother had avoided my eyes in the courtroom, and the way my older sister had walked out without a glance in my direction. 2 days later, the anonymous sender finally revealed themselves. An email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. The message was short. "I'm Thomas Langford, Claire's husband. I sent the recording because I couldn't watch them pressure you into something that wasn't right. Your father would have hated what they were doing. I'm sorry it took me this long to say something. I've told Claire I won't be part of any more of it." Thomas Langford was a name I had heard only in passing. Claire's husband of 8 years, a quiet man who rarely came to family events. He had been the unexpected ally. The recording that had changed the momentum of the case had come from inside their own marriage. I replied with a simple thank you and saved the email with the rest of the evidence. Another new supporting character who had chosen truth over loyalty. The settlement talks that followed were tense but short. Their attorney proposed a revised agreement that left me as a beneficiary with equal say in any future decisions about the manor. In exchange, they asked that I not pursue further claims about the coordinated statements or the pressure campaign. Linda advised me it was a reasonable compromise that protected what mattered without dragging everything into public court records. I signed the revised documents on a quiet afternoon in Linda's office. The original amendment was withdrawn. The injunction was lifted because it was no longer needed. On paper, the situation was resolved. In reality, the relationships were not. My mother called once after the settlement. Her voice was tired. "I didn't want it to go this far, Elena. Claire said it was the only way to keep things simple. I just wanted peace." I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I said, "I understand why you signed. But signing under pressure and then letting her isolate me isn't peace. It's just easier for everyone else." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know how to fix this now." "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said gently. "I'm asking you to stop expecting me to pretend it didn't happen." She didn't call again after that. My older sister never called. Nathan sent one final text saying the family thought it was best if I stayed away from the next gathering at the lake. I didn't argue. I simply didn't respond. The old support network holiday calls, casual check-ins, the assumption that blood meant automatic loyalty had dissolved. What remained was a quiet, permanent distance. Thomas Langford reached out once more, a short email, saying he and Claire were separating and that he hoped I would be able to enjoy the manor without the old fights. I wished him well and meant it. He had chosen a different path than the rest of them. Months later, I drove to the lakeside manor on a clear afternoon. Mr. Harlan met me at the gate with the keys and a small smile. "It's good to see you here without all the lawyers," he said. I walked the familiar paths and stood on the dock I had helped repair. The water was calm. The house itself looked the same as it always had, solid, well-kept waiting. I didn't feel the old ache of exclusion anymore. I felt something quieter and steadier, ownership of my own boundaries. I had won the legal fight. I had kept my name on the trust and stopped the forced transfer my older sister and my mother had tried to push through legal papers and coordinated pressure. But I had lost the version of family I once tried to preserve. The relationships with my mother and my older sister were permanently altered. The casual alliances with cousins like Nathan were gone. The old network that had expected me to stay silent for the sake of peace no longer existed in the same way. What I gained in its place was something I hadn't fully understood until the papers were signed and the calls stopped. I gained the certainty that I could protect what was mine without betraying myself. I gained a clearer sense of who would stand with me when it cost them something: Sophia, Mr. Harlan, Thomas Langford, even Mia Chen, at work, who had quietly helped without being asked. And I gained the peace that comes from no longer waiting for people who had already chosen their side to change their minds. The lesson arrived slowly in the quiet weeks after the settlement. Loyalty that requires you to sign away your own voice is not loyalty. It is a transaction dressed up as family. Peace does not come from keeping everyone comfortable. It comes from deciding what you will and will not accept, then living inside those boundaries, even when the people you once trusted walk away. I still think about the manor sometimes and about the summers that shaped all of us. But I no longer feel responsible for holding the family together at the cost of my own self-respect. That price was too high, and I stopped paying it the moment I refused to sign the first set of papers. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been asked to sign something, stay silent or step aside so someone else could keep the peace that only benefited them, what boundary did you finally set? Share your moment in the comments. I read everyone.